In the last stream, we began working through the Living Age section of the questline here, dipping our toes into the beginnings of two of the three magic mods in this questline, those being Botania, to get started with, for Living Wood and Living Rock, and then more importantly towards the end, we got started with a mod called Nature's Aura, setting up the natural altar, and we just acquired the Altar of Birthing at the end of the last episode. This altar is going to allow us to automatically summon specific mobs that we need to summon in order to get specific mob drops to allow us to automate the production of these computing cores, because as we saw in the last stream, we need to get thermal paste to automate these computing cores, and that thermal paste is made using blaze powder, Bazal's powder, and blitz powder. We're already making the blaze powder and blaze powder automatically, or should I say we already have the ability to get these automatically because we're already getting blaze rods and blaze cubes from our pre-existing mob farm. What we're not getting though is Bazal's shards and the blitz motes. Both of those we're going to have to get by summoning different mobs using the Altar of Birthing. But before we do any of that, I have done a little bit of work between streams on kind of redesigning the base a little bit. Essentially, I've added these roofs to each of the four quadrants of the base, and I've also gone ahead and doubled up the amount of space each of these platforms has. I basically doubled how long they were. Previously, they were rectangular, and now they are perfectly square. And I've done the same on the bottom here as well to give us a lot more space to work with in today's stream. And so I am going to spend some time moving a couple of things around so that we don't have awkward situations like this and like this, where our pillars don't really line up with the old systems that we had in our previous base. And I kind of want to move a lot of stuff to make everything hopefully run just a little bit smoother. For example, right now we have 3 pressure chambers over here, making our transistors, our capacitors, and our empty PCBs. And then over here we have 2 more pressure chambers, one of which is able to make our compressed mechanisms. This one is a 4x4, which made sense previously when we needed 4 different inputs. Now that we only have the 1 input, we can once again downsize this back to a 3x3, which I think we definitely will do. And then over here we have our much maligned draw for compressed iron, which has constantly been causing issues for us, and as you can see is once again completely rammed with iron, which is not ideal. And so what I want to do is I kind of want to tear down all 5 of the pressure chambers and move them all to the back of this platform. I've thrown down some cobblestone here to show where I want to put each of the 5, and I want to set them all up in kind of the exact same way that we've set up these pressure chambers. I want all of them to have an ME pattern provider. I want to make sure that all of the ME pattern providers are set to blocking mode to make sure that we never end up in a similar situation to this again, so that the system will never send more than 1 batch's worth of crafts at a time. And it's also going to free up a bunch of space in the middle and allow us to use 1 set of liquid compressors to power all of our pressure chambers, as opposed to having this kind of haphazard split system that we currently have. And then almost everything else is going to remain kind of the same, but just be moved and potentially reorganized somewhat to make things easier. For example, I might end up moving the arc furnace here over to this side of the base with all of the other multi-block machines from Immersive Engineering. The same is also true of the Automated Engineer's workbench here as well. I think we'll move that over to this side of the base so we have all of those multi-block machines in the same place. And then I might even move the crushing wheels kind of over here into the create area where we have all of our other create stuff, again, just to kind of make things a bit more uniform. Before we do any of that though, I do want to show off P2P tunnels. This is something that a bunch of people have been asking about in the YouTube comments, and I think it's something that's actually going to be very useful as we reorganize the base here, because the final thing that I would like to do is I would like to completely get rid of almost all of the integrated dynamics cables that we have, and all of the integrated dynamics energy exporters, item interfaces, all of that stuff I want to replace with either flux networks. I believe we can just throw down some flux points onto all of the different places where we need energy. So right here, we could just replace this logic cable and this energy exporter with a flux point and give our industrial fermenter as much power as it's going to need. It's also going to benefit from being able to access the magmator power that we set up in the Nether, as opposed to being limited by the power that we have down here from our alternators, which again is going to be a positive. And it's also just going to make the base a little bit cleaner, because we're not going to have all of these integrated dynamics cables running all over the base. So I want to replace all of the energy with flux points, and I want to replace all of the item importers and exporters with importers and exporters from Applied Energistics. Of course, to do that is going to require more channels, and that's kind of where P2P comes into play. So the P2P tunnels here don't give you more channels, but they make it a little easier to run channels to different locations. So what we can do here, if we throw down our P2P tunnel, we could, for example, have our dense cable here and our P2P tunnel here, or you can put the P2P tunnel directly onto the controller. I think we might end up with cable between, and I'll show you why in just a second. But from there, what we can do is we can run cable, and then we can throw down another dense cable with another P2P tunnel and do something like this. The reason that you'd want to do this is that if we grab a memory card, this guy right here, again, thankfully fairly easy to make, we can then, I believe, shift right click over here, and it says new device configuration created and copied to memory card. And then over here, we want to regular right click without shifting. And now we have connected these two devices together. Right now, neither of them are online because they're both on their own network, and that's because there's no power provided to this. Much like we did before, we can use quartz fiber here to connect these up to the system without actually providing channels if we did something like this and like this, and that should hopefully bring both of these online. And you'll see at the top that they have a unique frequency. This one has B901, and over here, this is also B901, and it says carried channels 0. Basically, what we have here is we have a dense cable that has 32 unused channels. And then what we've done here is we've run a separate cable that kind of takes all of these channels and spits them out over at the other side. This is going to be easier to show off if we have some smart dense cable to work with, because the smart dense cable, of course, is going to show us how many channels are being used. And so if I quickly replace this guy like this, and we'll do the same over here, we'll replace this like this, you'll see right now at the top there, 0 out of 32 channels being used. However, if we were to go ahead and, for example, take our ME drive here and place that down on the opposite side of this cable, let's say right about here, like this, and put this in, you'll see that here, we're using 1 out of 32 channels. Over here, we're also using 1 out of 32 channels, but here, we're not using any extra channels. So this cable here is only being used exclusively for the P2P tunnels. And again, if we were to get some kind of regular smart flux cable here, which I believe our system should be able to create, let's hit start, and let's go ahead and craft up one of those. If I put this down, let's say right about here, like this, that is going to temporarily cause an issue for us, but we can do this, this, and ideally, this, and this. So now, right here, this says 2 of 8 channels, and those 2 channels are the ME tunnels on both sides. We can put as many items that we want on this side of the P2P tunnel, and it's not going to use up any of these channels on this cable. The reason that's useful is it means we just have to run fewer cables around the base. Right now, we have one cable that runs this way. We then have another cable that runs along the bottom here. We have another cable that runs up from the top, and then we have another cable over here that runs this way. And we're running all of those to all of these different destinations to try and get enough channels to where they need to go. But what we can do here, not only can we save on dense cable, because for example, down here, we've got dense cable running from here all the way around over to here. What we could do in this scenario is kind of get rid of the cable from here all the way back here and just replace it with 2 P2P tunnels, and then just have one regular flux cable running between those two. And I think it's just going to make it a lot easier for us to run cabling to all of the different quadrants of the base. And so what I think I'm going to do is I'm going to get a bunch more dense cable, and I'm going to try and color coordinate the cable as well, just to make it a little easier for us to know where all of the cable is going. So we are going to need some more flux crystals to make that work, but essentially you can craft some dense cable around any color die to get any other color of flux cables. Those flux cables can go down right next to each other and they won't connect. So if I were to put a blue dense cable here, it wouldn't connect to this regular dense cable. And if I had a pink one next to that, that would not connect either. And so what I think we'll do is, for now, we have 4 quadrants. Each quadrant has 2 different levels to it. And so that kind of gives us 8 areas in total. And so what I think I will do is get 8 different colors of dense cable, get 8 sets of P2P tunnels, and then basically have a dedicated dense cable for each quadrant of each floor of the base. So like this here is 1, this is 2, we have the third one in that corner, fourth one here, and then 4 more on top as well. And essentially, if we use P2P tunnels there, we can dedicate 32 channels to each quadrant of the base and then run all of those off of very few Fluix cables to hopefully make things just look that little bit nicer. And it turns out that I was incorrect about the way these pillars work. I was a little bit worried that we wouldn't be able to use the facades for these pillars because I thought the connected texture wouldn't work. However, thankfully, that's not the case. If we were to grab some stone, we can quickly chisel that into smooth stone with our chisel, and then up on the surface here, we can then go ahead and use our mason's table to craft that into the stone pillars that we're using around the base. And then if we craft that stone pillar with some of these cable anchors that we made previously, we get these cable facades, and you can use these with both regular Fluix cable and with dense cable as well, which I think we're going to take full advantage of because I think it is going to look much nicer. For example, if we have our dense cable run up through the pillars like this, and then we just throw down these like this to cover them up and make it look that little bit nicer. Of course, there's like a weird connected texture bit there, but of course, if we replace all of this with facades, it should look just fine. And that's going to allow us to run these up without having to have cables in the roof like this, and without having to have kind of like weird cable running across the floor like this. All right, so not too long later, I've moved all of the pressure chambers over to this center platform, and it looks so much tidier than it did previously, and it should hopefully work much more smoothly now that we don't have the iron backing up in our compressed iron pressure chamber. And I've also gone ahead and set up our first P2P tunnel as well. So over here, what I have done is I've placed down a blue ME-dense smart cable. I did make some regular cable, but I figured we might as well have the smart version on here so we can see at a glance how many channels are being used. For example, right now we can see that we're using 5 out of a possible 32 channels. The way this works is we have our dense cable here. The dense cable doesn't need to be here. As I mentioned before, you can put the P2P tunnel directly onto the controller. This is kind of just because I think it's going to look better, and also because it's going to make it easier for us to see how many channels are being used in each different part of the base at a glance without having to like run and do some calculations. So right here, we can see that the top portion of this quadrant of the base is using 5 out of its allocated 32 channels. Down here, there's another dense cable. We've then just got a facade, of course, covering that up, so it looks nice connecting it to the floor. Then we have our P2P tunnel right here. This is set to input side. Again, so shift right click with the memory card to generate it as an input side. We then have our quartz fiber running power to this line, which is not the same line as the smart cable. That then runs up through the pillar, so this is completely covered by facades. We then have more facades over here for grass. The grass does look a little bit janky. Up on the surface here, you can see the line where the facade is because it's a different color to the regular grass. Not much we can do about that just yet outside of replacing all of the grass with facades. For now, though, I think it looks okay. And then over here, that then runs up and then in the floor along over to here. And here is where we have our second P2P tunnel. And one of the other benefits here of the P2P tunnel system is that we can have as many of these P2P outputs as we like. So right now we have one right here, and then on the other side we have cables that run to all of our pattern providers to connect everything together. If we wanted to, though, we could then kind of split this cable right here. We could then run it kind of over in this direction. We could put down another P2P tunnel, connect it to the same frequency. So again, shift right click on the input and then right click on both of the outputs. And we could then just have another cable, for example, running to these two pattern providers to give them the channels that they need as well. And we could connect them all up whilst only using 2 channels on the actual long cable. So the long cable we're running is only ever going to use however many channels are associated with the number of P2P tunnels that we have. So right now it's 2, but if we added a third one, it would be 3. And in theory, we could put down up to 8 P2P tunnels up here on this one ME Fluix cable, but we would have access to all 32 channels coming from the controller downstairs without having to use really much dense cable at all. Again, we could get away with using 0 if we wanted to. I've just chosen to do it like this because I think it looks nicer. And so essentially what we're going to do now is we're going to, of course, cover this up with facades. I've left this unfacaded for now so that I can show you how it works, but we are going to go ahead and, of course, cover all of this up on the top and bottom so we don't even see the cables working, and we're going to do that all the way around, of course, to make it look nice. And we're going to do the same thing with the other 4 quadrants of the base. Each one of the quadrants is going to get a different color for the top level and for the bottom level, and of course we're going to replace all of the item imports and item exports and item interfaces that we have with importers and exporters from AE2, and we're also going to move stuff like these 2 machines here over to the other platforms, and hopefully it's going to look way nicer. Just a quick heads up here, I was talking to the Twitch chat about how much I liked how Ender.io used to work in terms of showing you the cables through the facades, and it turns out that you can now do that in Applied Energistics 2 as well. If you craft up the network tool here, which is super easy to make, it is just an illumination panel. We've made a bunch of these for all of our crafting terminals, as well as a chest, a calculation processor, and any of the AE2 wrenches. You get a network tool. With this, you can shift right click, and in the top left, you can turn on transparent facades, and now you can see where all of the cables are through all of the facades, which just makes it that little bit easier going forward for us to know kind of where our cables are, and it makes it easier for us to connect things up. For now, it's not too bad because we don't have that many cables that have been facaded, but as we go forward and kind of facade up the entire base, it's going to be nice to be able to see where everything is with a tool. Also, another quick tip here, it turns out you can hold down Ultimine and break all of the blocks of the arc furnace, or almost all of the blocks of the arc furnace at once. It did work with the automated crafting workbench. I think the issue there might be that the arc furnace has more than 64 blocks, which is why it didn't quite do all of them, but for machines up to 64 blocks in size, you can just hold down Ultimine and it will break all of them, despite the fact that it is made up of different blocks. Okay, and again, a little bit of time later, we now have a much cleaner looking quadrant over here. We have our 5 compressors along the back. I've moved the assembly controller that allows us to make the finished PCBs here to the middle, and I've moved the plastic production system here just kind of 90 degrees from where it was previously into this newly created nice space. The setup is exactly the same. The only difference here is that we now have an ME export bus that is ready to export coal to the thermoneumatic processing plant, as opposed to an item exporter from Integrated Dynamics. Over here, we've also gone ahead and moved the machines on this platform. So we've moved the fermenter, the squeezer, and the 2 refineries to the back. We've also moved over the automated engineer's workbench along with the bottling plant, and front and center here is the arc furnace with the metal press behind it. These have their pattern providers connected up. We did go through quite a convoluted route to get that one up there connected to try and make it look just a little bit nicer. Again, in here, if I show you the cable, you can see that we've come across here. We have set up another P2P tunnel. So over here, we now have the red channel that looks surprisingly pink, but as you can see at the top, this is indeed red cable. That goes down to here, P2P tunnel connects up, and then we run that across through the grass again, round, and then if we go up here, we can see that it kind of goes over to here. This is where the P2P tunnel comes out. We then have it split, it goes up and runs round to connect up to the top of the arc furnace. That way we don't have this tall exposed cable going through the middle of the base, and we connect up both the metal press and the automated workbench. And so those are all connected up. Over here though, we were previously using Integrated Dynamics to move the liquids produced by the refinery. For example, over here, to make the phenolic resin, we need 2 liquids. We need creosote, which is still, of course, being made over on the bottom of this platform over here. It's being stored in this fluid tank, so we need to access that. And we also have our other liquid, the acetaldehyde right here. We need to get that over into this refinery as well. And so thankfully, I'm fairly certain that we can do that using Applied Energistics. I did teach our system how to make both the import buses and the export buses. And so I think here, if we put an export bus down on here, we're of course going to connect that up to our system via some cable. We can of course run that through the middle, and we should have cable right here. We do indeed. So we're going to run that like this. And then I think from there, in here, if we type in acetaldehyde, I think we can just click and drag, and that is now ready to export that. By default, it does look like it says 0.001. I don't think that necessarily matters. And what I also think we should be able to do is then throw down a storage bus onto here. And I'm fairly certain that once we connect that up, we should see the liquid move over into the refinery. Let's see if that works. It is pretty slow. And so, yeah, this does indeed work. I'm also being told that export buses gradually speed up as well, which is interesting. So maybe those will get faster. Oh yeah, it does get way faster. That is interesting. I didn't actually know that that was a thing. Either way, we should be able to do the exact same thing with the creosote as well. We should be able to put an external storage over here onto our tank, and then of course run that around over to the other side of the refinery. So we're going to get another exporter, which we can request. That's going to go down right about here, and then we're going to have this one export the creosote oil, like so. And we probably do want to replace the tank that we have here. Right now we're using a create tank. It would probably make more sense to replace that with a fluid draw. The reason for that is that the fluid draws are much more easily upgradable, both in terms of capacity, but also in terms of void upgrades, because one problem we have been running into, and that we have currently, is that once we are full on creosote, once we're fully backed up on creosote, we stop making coal coke, and that coal coke is of course required for hot graphite dust, which we then need for further processing, and so we do actually need to keep processing the coal even when we fully back up on creosote. That's where having a void upgrade inside of a fluid draw would be helpful. We can also, of course, connect the fluid draw directly to our draw controller here, which then means that we don't actually have to craft another external storage bus, which would be ideal. And the fluid draws themselves here are not too difficult to make. They do require a fluid cell surrounded by planks, but really nothing too crazy. And we'll probably replace these logic cables. We have them all set up right now to export the fluid around here. I'll probably just replace those with fluid pipes and maybe even run those under the platform for a cleaner look. Speaking of a cleaner look, over here we have our 4 liquid compressors, so the exact same compressors that we had previously, but now the setup looks a little nicer. So down here, I have kept the integrated dynamic system for one thing, and that is moving lava from our train tank over to the compressor, because right now that's really all the lava is being used for, and these monodirectional connectors are actually way easier than running ME cable all the way out here just to put down an external storage and then an exporter for fluid. So we have a monodirectional connector here that connects all the way across to another monodirectional connector right here. That then goes on a right angle down to here. Then we have another right angle with more monodirectional connectors running over to here. And that allowed us to very quickly move the lava from one end of the base to the other. We'll probably keep that around until we get something like the quantum entangler porter from Mechanism. This is going to allow us to very easily wirelessly move items, fluids, gases, etc. via just 2 of these, one at each end. And so we might look at using that in the future. For now though, this is all connected up. These are all sped up, and we've got those connected to all of the stuff. They're connected to all of the pressure chambers. They're also connected to our assembly controller, and they're connected over here to the vortex tubes as well to keep all of those running as intended. And so I'm quite happy with the way this platform is looking. We've got a ton of space down here, and this up here is looking much more tidy than it did previously. And of course we have all of these down, and we have them ready with blocking mode to make sure they don't back up, which is fantastic. I'm also happy with this platform over here. This is pretty much good to go. Of course, we need to throw down a bunch of facades here to cover up this cable and keep that working. And of course we need to export the creosote, but for the most part, this is kind of all working as it was previously. Over here, we have our last 2 platforms. I think I'm going to move the blast furnace down to the lower level of the platform here. I contemplated moving it over into the immersive engineering quadrant, but there's not really much space. I'm quite happy with how things look here. I don't want to cram too much stuff in. And so instead, I think I'll probably put this down with the other kind of resource generators down here. We've got all of our other ingots being made. I feel like it makes sense to put steel down here somewhere with that blast furnace. I do want to organize these. These look horrendous right now and definitely need some work. I also do want to move some of this. I'll probably move these machines kind of back to the outside wall here and maybe recenter the crafting storages on the center of the platform now that we've made it a bit bigger. But over here, there's actually a lot of stuff now that we can probably just get rid of. For example, right here, we have a setup in place that produces these cogwheels, but we can just have our system craft the cogwheels for us. It's not any more efficient to have the mechanical mixer make this cogwheel, and so we can probably just get rid of this and teach the AE2 system how to craft the cogwheels. The same is kind of true for the andesite alloy as well. It is more efficient to use the mixer here than it is just to craft it, but it probably would be way faster to craft it, and there is also the option of using the induction smelter here to get the same efficiency of the mixer, albeit at the cost of power, so we'll probably take that down as well. The same is true with shaft. We don't really need the shaft to be crafted with the saw. We can just do that in the AE2 system as well. That should be fine. And so I think a lot of the stuff here is probably just going to be taken offline. I have taken down the crushing wheels that we had over here, and those are currently in this chest right here, and I'm going to reset all of the create stuff, including the Tesla coil, up in this section. We did before have 2 sets of crushing wheels, 1 set for crushing hot graphite and 1 set for automating the production of rutile dust. I think we're going to kind of merge those together and just have 1 set of crushing wheels that is set up with a pattern provider to allow our system to kind of craft whatever it is that it wants to craft within that system. The same is true with things like the crafter here. This is no longer necessary. I think what we'll do is we'll just have our system know how to make compressed iron. And then over here, we can, of course, just teach our system how to craft that compressed iron into compressed iron gears, throw that into one of our available molecular assemblers, and we're kind of good to go. We don't really need this or this anymore at all. And so I am going to organize this, but a lot of what is here is probably just going to get taken down. Same with the Invar. I think it's going to be better to just use the induction smelter going forward, tell it to send iron and nickel and have it make Invar whenever it's needed. If we want to keep a lot of Invar at once, we can just use the requester to make sure we always have it, as opposed to having this mixer here with the blaze burner eating up our lava to make Invar in a way that is kind of less efficient than it needs to be. And then as far as the Invar rods here are concerned, again, it is more efficient to do it with the rolling mill, but we could probably just throw down another multi-servo press with a rod die and have it automated that way as well. I think a lot of the non-create methods are going to be faster and more easily automatable going forward and scalable in a way that you can't really do with the create contraptions. We do have to keep this bit, of course, with the basic mechanisms because I believe there's no alternative recipe for making that basic mechanism, so we will keep that for the time being. What I'll probably do, though, is I'll probably change the way that the treated wood is made. So right now it's part of the belt. I'll probably move that out so the treated wood is made and then exported like all of this stuff is, so that we can have a backlog of treated wood that we have access to via our system, so that if we ever need to craft with treated wood, which we've had to do a few times now, we don't have to come and kind of do this where we try and steal it very, very slowly from this belt. Instead, we'll hopefully just have a buffer of it somewhere that we can then use to kind of pump onto here and also use for crafting as and when we need it. And so, yeah, I'm going to do a bit more base work and then we'll come back and hopefully look at getting the birthing altar up and running. All right, so once again, not too long later, we've moved basically all of the create stuff that was dotted around the base over into this create quadrant. And we've also taken away a lot of what we had previously, because as we said, we don't really need most of them now. We can just use our AE2 autocrafting to do a lot of that work for us. And so, for example, things like Invar are now taught to the induction smelter. We're no longer making that in a basin. Same with the cogwheel here and the shaft. All of that is now being made inside of the AE2 system, as opposed to having a dedicated setup in the create quadrant. Over here, we just have our andesite shop setup, which I've not moved, but we probably will move at some point soon. For now, it is hooked up to our draw controller, and so it is accessible to the system. We have our wall of mechanical crafters. We have our new singular crushing wheel setup. Over here, we've taught it how to make both fluix dust and rutile dust, so that's all done in here now, and that's all connected up as it should be. We have our charging station, and we have our line of machinery that is capable of producing basic mechanisms. The idea here is exactly the same as it was before, but now we are using these export buses from AE2 to export all of the items required. And as I mentioned, we have kind of decoupled the creosote here. So now the creosote is going to be made ahead of time, sent through to a drawer so that we can kind of buffer that creosote so it's available as and when we need it for other crafting, but then it will still be pulled out and processed over into basic mechanisms. I have not yet reorganized this platform. I have taken away all of the integrated dynamics cabling, and so right now none of these coke ovens are receiving coal. They're also not sending their creosote anywhere, and so this does need some work. We also do need to put down that fluid drawer that we made a moment ago. And over here, I've also not really made any changes aside from moving the blast furnace down to the lower level of the platform here, and that is again now hooked up to our draw controller, and so we do once again have access to that steel. It's also automated up here as well. It's not fully automated though, because I've not put the items in. The slight problem that we run into here is that we need to export more than one item to this blast furnace. We need to export both iron and coal. Now, by default, you can't do that with the export bus because you'll see there's only one slot inside of it. However, if we go ahead and make, I believe, a capacity card, we should be able to increase the capacity of the ME export bus here, giving us even more slots. And so now we should be able to go ahead and export both iron and coal to the blast furnace. And of course, at that point, you realize you actually need coal coke, Isaac, and not just regular coal. Charcoal, I think, would also work. But for now, if we do this and we put that back in the system, that should get exported alongside the iron through to the blast furnace and should keep things going. And of course, once we upgrade and update this area over here, we'll start getting that coal coke in again, and this will all come back online, which is good. And so now we can kind of pivot our focus over back to that birthing altar. Real quick before we do, over here, we have all of our dense cable down, and I'm going to show off just how much ME cable we now have hidden in the walls and floors of the base. So every single one of these pillars, apart from this one right here, is actually now ME cable. This one will, I think, eventually become ME cable as well. So what we've done here is we have all of our dense cable connected to P2P tunnels, apart from the brown cable. That one still needs to be set up. So all of these are connected up, and they all are associated to different sections of the base. And so we have the blue here, which goes, I believe, to the top floor of this quadrant. Then the white goes to the bottom floor of this quadrant. And then we kind of continue that pattern as we go around. So the red here is, I believe, the top floor of this quadrant, and then the brown is the bottom floor, and then we go around again, and that pattern repeats all the way around. And I have gone ahead and run all the cables up and across the top, just so that we don't have any cables kind of running over the void at the bottom here. I think it just looks a little bit nicer to not have kind of visible cables running between the platforms, and so we've run all of them up through the roof. That has involved the use of some of these cable anchors to make sure that things don't touch, but right here we have one cable that goes up, across, and connects to the top, and we have another one that goes up, across, and down, and connects up to the bottom for all of our machines and for all of our crafting CPUs and our ME crafting core. And so now that's taken care of, we can look at getting that birthing altar up and running. The birthing altar we do have in the system here, and if we go ahead and grab the Nature's Aura guidebook here, we should be able to search for the birthing altar in the book. And just like before, this is another multi-block structure. This one I'm going to place down opposite our pre-existing mob farm. Now, it's a little bit big. I'm going to put it right about here, I think, like that. And the good news here is that this is not particularly difficult to make. To build this, we need the birthing altar in the middle, we need a bunch of hair around the outside, and then we need some of these planks, which I'm fairly certain are not regular planks. If we go ahead and break these, we can see we need ancient planks and we need infused brick. So in terms of this guy, we can throw that down right about there. Now, in terms of the infused brick, we don't have any. And in terms of the ancient planks, we also don't have any. So let's take a look real quick at what is required for both of these. The infused brick here is made by crafting 3 infused rock, and the infused rock can be made by just putting stone onto our Nature's Altar. Thankfully, we do have stone being made for us by our igneous extruder, and so we just need to take this over to the altar that we set up in the last episode, right about here, and that is going to hopefully fairly quickly convert that into stone for us, and so it shouldn't be too difficult for us to get all of the infused brick required. And then as far as the ancient planks are concerned, for that, I think we might need an ancient sapling, and this is another recipe that is going to require the Ritual of the Forest, again, something else that we set up in the last episode. For this, we need to get 1 sapling, 1 wheat seed, 1 sugarcane, 1 poppy, 1 dandelion, and then 1 seed. I think we have basically everything we need there. We do have a poppy. I'll take that. We should have quite a lot of dandelions. We do indeed. Fantastic. Saplings we of course have. Sugarcane we can buy, but we also have. Fantastic. And then what else did I need? I needed 1 gold leaf and 1 wheat seed. Wheat seeds we have in abundance, and gold leaf we have from the trees that we set up in the last episode. I'm going to go ahead and grab an extra sapling here because of course we do have to grow a tree in the middle to make this happen. And if we go ahead and put all of these down onto the pillars, we should then be able to throw our tree in the middle, like so. And then from there, we of course need the gold dust, just like we had in the last episode. Again, thankfully, we still have quite a bit of that gold powder ready to go. And again, if memory serves me right, I believe that the construction looks something like this. And if we go ahead and grab our hoe, we should be able to accelerate the growth of this sapling, at which point we should, hopefully, see all of those items get collected and converted into one ancient sapling that we can then use to get ourselves really as many ancient planks as we want. So if I put this down, let's say here, and we once again shift with our iron hoe, can we grow that? We totally can. From there, I assume that we can go ahead and auto-mine this entire tree. We can. And that gets us some ancient bark and ancient logs. The ancient logs can be turned into ancient planks. And we only need, I think, 4 ancient planks in order to build the altar over here. We need 1 right about here. And then we need 1 here, 1 here, and 1 here. Perfect. And so real quick, I guess what we're going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and grab a bunch more stone and convert it into the infused rock so we can get all of the infused bricks that we're going to need. And on top of that, I'm also going to go ahead and get a bunch more wheat as well. We should also look at getting some more wireless range boosters for our wireless access terminal because it's a little annoying that we can't quite use it all the way out on that platform, at least not just yet. Right now, we only have 1 wheat. We're, of course, going to need way more wheat to get all of those hair blocks. And so I'm also going to use our hoe to quickly get a lot more wheat as well. All right, so not too much altar work later, and we have all of the stone required here. We also, after a fair bit of hoe work as well, have all of the hay bales required. We just need to dig out the bricks here. 16 blocks is what you need. We got 22 just to be safe. And the idea here is that you can drop specific sets of ingredients onto the birthing altar, and if you have enough aura in the area, aura being kind of the power of nature's aura, or I guess the currency of nature's aura, if you have enough of that in the area, which we don't really have to worry about just yet, then it will go ahead and summon a particular mob, and each mob has kind of its own recipe as to what's required. These hay bales are not going down nicely. I guess I should have probably put them down to face upwards, but I'm pretty sure this will still work regardless. And so for us, for example, we want to summon the Bearzells, and you can see the recipe by clicking on the spawn egg. On top of that, we also want the Blitz, which is this guy right here. And so we'll bookmark that egg as well. And so, for example, if I wanted to summon 1 Bearzells, I would drop 1 cobbled deep slate, 1 living rock effigy, and 1 spirit of awakening onto this altar, and that would summon this mob. Now, the good news is, these are not particularly difficult to make. The living rock effigy is made just from living rock. In fact, we probably have some left from the last episode. We do indeed. And as you'll have seen there is in fact an effigy die that we can make that allows us to make these inside of a multi-server press, something that I think is going to be worth investing in. You can also do it on the mechanical saw from Create, but again, I think it's going to be easier to automate and more scalable to automate it using the multi-server press here. So I'll probably throw another one of those down with the effigy die, which is just 4 Invar plates. Again, Invar is craftable, and we do of course have this multi-server press here, which is capable of making plates for us. And all of this is still set up to push the items back up into the system, and so that's going to make more than enough plates for us. And then as far as the Blaze spawn is concerned here, the recipe is basically the same, but we need glowstone instead of cobbled deep slate. So the cobbled deep slate can be made with another igneous extruder, this time with lava and packed ice. As we saw before, that really shouldn't be too difficult. We can probably add that to the end of the current setup that we have. In fact, we kind of need to do that now before we progress. And so if we want to get packed ice, we need to either use the pure daisy or bulk washing. And I think we should be able to get an ice charge fairly easily here because we should have blaze powder. That blaze powder can then be crafted into the ice shard, and then that ice shard there can be crafted with a bucket of water to make regular ice. Now, the bucket of water isn't currently available. That is fine. Let's do this, and then let's quickly grab water from our unlimited water sink right about here. We should then be able to craft those two together like this to get ice, and then from there we can then wash that ice on one of our bulk washing stations, which we should have down here. We do indeed. So if we put that right here like this, that's then going to go ahead and turn that ice into packed ice. Nice. And so now that we have that packed ice, we should be able to put that down, let's say right about here. We should be able to quickly whip up another igneous extruder. For that, we're just missing a redstone servo plus 1 Constantan gear. Boom and boom. boom, at which point we can do the same thing we've done before. We can whack that down like this. We can make sure there's lava on the other side. Lava is one of those resources that we are very much so not low on. Boom. And in theory, that should begin making cobble deep slate. Nice. At which point we can go ahead and throw our oak draw down like so. And if we make sure that this is set to pull from the bottom, which we can do with our puller upgrade, wank that in, make sure it's set to down, we then get cobble deep slate. Nice. So let's take those. And now we should have what it takes to make the effigy die as well. We do. Do we have what it takes to make another multi-servo press? I believe we might, if we have enough Constantin. We totally do. Fantastic. Let's go and add that to our line of ever-increasing multi-servo presses. We'll throw you there. We'll throw the die in, and we'll make sure that's connected on the bank with some basic universal cable, at which point we should then be able to start making these living rock effigies. Now, the final piece of the puzzle are these Spirit of Awakening. And to make these, we need more living rock along with a source gem. So the source gem is made inside of an imbuement chamber with an amethyst shard. So the imbuement chamber is pretty easy to make. It requires some archwood planks and a gold ingot. The archwood is acquired from an archwood sapling, and that is purchasable from the shop. So if we quickly head on back up here, we do still have a shop available. Let's quickly grab one of these samplings. I don't think it matters at all which sampling you purchase. I think any of the colors will get the job done. And so back over here, if we do something like this, we get a very large tree, which we can then once again tear down to get a ton of archwood planks. And with those planks, we should now be able to craft up our imbuement chamber. And if I'm not mistaken, we should then be able to take our amethyst shards and place those into the imbuement chamber to begin to make the source gems. Now, I believe this process will work passively. I think it's just really, really, really slow. So you can see on the right there, it does say crafting process. We're at 8, 10, 12. It is going to work and it is going to keep going. It's just not very fast, which is kind of fine for the most part. We can make quite a few of these imbuement chambers if we want and just have them all running. The thing that we actually don't have automated just yet is the amethyst shards. Over here, we did set up the budding amethyst to grow the amethyst clusters automatically, and we even added all of the crystal growth accelerators. However, we saw that if we tried to use the annihilation plane in the same way that we've been doing for this Certus quartz cluster, for whatever reason, it just doesn't work with the amethyst cluster. It breaks it far too early, and you don't actually get any amethyst. Thankfully, this is fairly easily fixed by using a modular router instead. This is a super nifty mod, and it kind of revolves fully, as the name suggests, around these modular routers. Here, we need a blank module, which is paper, gold, and then an integrated circuit. That gets us 6 blank modules, enough to make 6 lots of these modular routers, so 24 in total, which is fantastic. For now, we just need the one. I'm going to put ours right about here, like that, pointing at the amethyst cluster. And these by themselves don't really do anything, but depending on which modules and upgrades you put in them, they can do a lot of different stuff. For us, we are going to use the block breaker module, which is this guy right here, which is another one of the blank modules with a pickaxe of really any tier. The tier of the pickaxe does affect what it can mine. For us, it's not really going to matter because we don't need it to be a diamond pickaxe. I'm going to make it a diamond pickaxe, but it could be any pickaxe, I think, because I think you don't need anything above a wood pickaxe to break the amethyst crystals here. But now in here, I believe that if we take our fully formed amethyst shard and change this module, so I'm going to right click on the module, change it to whitelist and change it to amethyst shard. Now, if I put this in and make sure that the breaker module is set to front like this, so it knows to break at the front like this, it should break this amethyst cluster and in theory should store it inside of the modular router. Okay, so this does now work. One thing to bear in mind, it didn't work initially, and that's because we have our chunks here claimed with the FTB chunks mod. If you have yours claimed, you need to open up the My Team button in the top left, click on the cogwheel for settings, and then over here where it says allow all fake players, by default this is set to false. Just click here, change it to true, click the tick in the top right, and this will start working. And so now this is doing the trick. So again, we just have the one whitelist filter for amethyst shard. It is set to matching dropped items. And now this waits until it's fully grown before it breaks the amethyst cluster, thus giving us a fairly quick and a very reliable source of amethyst shards. And so from there, we should be able to go ahead and do something like this, throwing down a draw. We can then go ahead and have the modular router push, or we could pull, I guess, with the draw as well. However, the modular router mod does have sender modules, which are pretty easy to make. It's one module and a piston. In here, we can just open this up with the right click, tell it to push to the back. And if we put this in here, it's now going to take all of those amethyst shards and push them into this drawer, which we can then, of course, go ahead and link with our linking tool and lock with our configuration tool. Nice. And so it should be fairly straightforward with an exporter for us to export these over to this imbuement chamber. From there, we can then, of course, just take the source gems once they're ready. Again, an item pipe would work here, I think, for pulling out the source gems when they're done. Again, we could also probably have a drawer next to it that pulls the source gems via a locked drawer with a puller module. But then once we have the source gem, we can, of course, just craft that into the Spirit of Awakening, like so. Thankfully, you get 8 of these at a time, which is very nice indeed. And once we have all of the items required, that being the Living Rock Effigy, the Cobbled Deep Slate, and the Spirit of Awakening, we can then take all of these over to our altar, and if we drop one of each item, 1, 2, 3, onto the altar, those items are going to be taken, like so, and it's going to summon for us a Bazals. Nice. And of course, now all we need to do is automatically kill those Bazals so that we can get the mob drops. And of course, we want to get as many mob drops as possible. And so what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and kind of duplicate this setup right here. Thankfully, you can put vector plates on top of the altar here, so you can put them down like this, and the altar does still work. And so I'm going to kind of duplicate the setup that we have here. I'm going to get another mob masher with the same looting and sharpness upgrades to maximize not only the speed at which the mobs die, but also the number of mob drops that we get from them. And I'm also going to put down another one of these absorption hoppers to collect all of those drops as well. And with that, we're almost there on fully automating the production of these items. I think the last thing that I will probably do is get another one of the pattern providers, which our system can make for us. And if we wanted to fully automate this, because of course we need to send these items over when we want the items to be created, what we should be able to do is potentially get something like an open crate from Botania. This is pretty nifty. It's made with just living wood planks, and thankfully we do have quite a lot of living wood logs here, so we can get an open crate fairly easily. The open crate will just drop items that you pipe into it. And so, for example, if we put the open crate down right about here, 2 blocks above the altar, we could then have our pattern provider go on top of that, like so. And if we were to go ahead and configure a pattern for summoning the Bazal, so if we were to shift click this in, like so, we here are actually going to change this so that it doesn't give us a spawn egg back. We're instead going to tell it that it gets the Bazal's shards back, so these guys right here. For now, I'll leave it like this, where it puts all 3 in and it gets 1 back. We are almost certainly going to get way more than 1 back due to the looting upgrade on the Mob Masher, but for now, if we take this and put it into here, our system effectively knows how to get Bazal shards, and it does that by sending these 3 items over to here. And so we can test this, of course, if we put all our items back in the system, and also over here, let's make sure that we link this up as well, so our system has access to that Cobbled Deep Slate. From there, we just need to grab some more Fluix cable, which we can, of course, request. Let me get quite a bit more of that, because we're going to need a decent amount of it. And let's also try and find our closest bit of cable, because there's actually not that much cable near here, due to the fact that this is not really one of the quadrants. But I don't think it should be too hard for us to run this to one of our local cables, at which point all of the items should get sent to the crate. And again, just as kind of a demonstration here, if you pipe an item into the open crate, it just gets dropped directly onto the floor like this. Now, you do have to be careful here, and I believe we are going to have to configure this in the same way that we configure the pattern providers for our pressure chamber. And by that, I mean that we want to set this to lock crafting until primary crafting result is returned. Because I noticed while testing, if you drop multiple sets of this recipe onto the altar, it won't work. So if you drop 1 of each item, it works just fine. If you were to drop 5 of the Spirits of Awakening, 5 Living Rock Effigies, and 5 Cobbled Deep Slate, it doesn't do anything. And so by setting it to lock the crafting until the primary result is returned, what it's going to do is it's not going to drop more of the items onto the altar until we get the Bazal shards, which means that the mob has been successfully killed, which does slow it down a little bit, but is going to ensure that we don't end up with any jankiness in terms of too many items getting left down on that platform. So real quick, this is a temporary cable, which I will hide momentarily, but I believe now that we should see the ability to craft Basal shards, and if I go ahead and click next and start, we should see it automatically summon a Basal for us, and of course, in the world where we actually have a mob masher up and running, we would be able to auto-kill this and get those shards back, which would be ideal. Alright, so not too long later, we now have another mob masher fully upgraded with 10 sharpness and 10 looting upgrades. I guess not fully upgraded, but it's pretty well upgraded for what we need. We've then put a lever on top this time as opposed to a redstone block underneath, and I've gone ahead and moved that horrible cable that I put down previously that now runs in the roof, and we're just about to craft a absorption hopper. This time around, we can just put this directly on the pattern provider, like this, and if we show working area, so long as that area goes low enough, which it doesn't quite, but we can go ahead and offset this with the offset DU, that's down up. If we go -1, that should move it down by 1. It totally does. That now fully covers all of our area, and if we press F3, we are facing in the east direction, so here, we're going to set east to items, and so now all the items will get pushed straight into the pattern provider, which, as we know, will then just dump them back into the system. And so now this should be pretty much good to go. And so if we were to go ahead and try this craft again and click start, we should see all the items get sent over and drop down. Now, ooh, this is where we run into a difficult situation. Let me cancel that craft and let me quickly change this off again, because now we actually need to blacklist certain items being picked up by the absorption hopper, and I actually don't know if the absorption hopper can do that. I do notice that there is a slot right here. This is from Mob Grinding Utilities. Does Mob Grinding Utilities have a filter of some persuasion? If it doesn't, there is the item collector that we can get from item collectors, and these are filterable and also not particularly difficult to make. I will upgrade this to the advanced item filter just because it's not a particularly expensive upgrade, and I think this is going to be more customizable for us. So let's get rid of the absorption hopper, and instead let's put down the advanced item collector like that. You want to place this onto the pattern provider. That's where it's going to put all of its items. In here, we can add to the blacklist the 3 items that we're going to send here. So that being the effigies, the cobbled deep slate, and the spirit of awakening. So if we add all 3 of these to the filter here, boom, boom, and boom. Again, we do want to make sure that the range is big enough, which it totally is. Fantastic. Let's go ahead, turn that off. And so now this should work. Let's try that one more time here. Can we now request the Basal's shard? We can. Those 3 items get dropped. They don't get picked up by the advanced item collector. The mob is spawned. It dies immediately, and we get 9 Basal's shards. Nice. And so now all we need to do is teach one more recipe here for that same pattern provider. This time around, though, we need to do this one here for the Blitz. And again, right here, we are going to specify that it is the Blitz moat that we're going to get out like that, encode. And now if we put this into the same pattern provider, that's this one right here, it should work in the exact same way. All we need to do is make sure that, again, we take the glowstone and we filter that to not get picked up by the item collector. So right here, this should work. Chat is right here. I have used the wrong ingredient. The blaze powder is what we want, but it is the moat that we're actually going to get from the mob. So we're going to re-encode that. There we go. And we're going to replace that back into the same pattern provider. And now this should work. So let's give that a try. If I want a blitz moat next, and we're missing glowstone, of course, we probably do need to teach our system how to make the glowstone as well. For now, though, if I craft that manually and we try that again, we should see the mob get spawned, and we should see it almost immediately die. Fantastic. And we get blitz moats. Again, we're going to get a somewhat random amount depending on how much we get from the looting upgrade, but we're almost always, and I think definitely always, going to get more than 1, and so the craft should always be successful. And so long as we get 1, we're good to go. So now that that's taken care of, we should be able to look at making the thermal paste required in order to make these computing cores. The thermal paste is made in a mixer with the blaze powder, the Basal's powder, the blitz powder, and the molten plastic. So over here, I am probably just going to teach our system to craft these. We could run them through a pulverizer. That is the more efficient way of doing it. You know what, we'll do it. We'll teach you how to use the pulverizer. That might end up being too slow. We can always, of course, go ahead and increase the speed of our pulverizer if it does end up being very slow. But let's encode this recipe here. Again, we're going to take away the flint and we're going to take away the snowball because we're not really too worried about those and they're not guaranteed outputs anyway. And we're just going to do the same thing for each and every one of these, including blaze powder. Blaze powder is more effective in the mechanical squeezer than it is in the pulverizer. Like, you get more blaze powder out if you run a blaze rod through the mechanical squeezer versus the pulverizer. And I do think it is probably worth us doing that. That is not the one I want. I need to do this one right here. Let's do this. Again, get rid of you and you, encode. And I think what I will do is I think I will take my mechanical squeezer that we have here. I'll move that downstairs next to our thermal expansion machines. And I think I will teach our system how to make blaze powder using the mechanical squeezer because it has no byproducts and you get more than you get from just running it through the pulverizer. So the first 3 here are going to go in this guy, like so. And then the last one is going to go into a brand new pattern provider, which we can, of course, request just as soon as we get some more printed logic circuits and turn them into logic processors, which we should be able to do. We're just missing a little bit of silicon, which we, again, thankfully have. We are, of course, going to have to automate the production of all of these components as well if we want to automate the production of the computer cores, because the computer cores do require all of those parts. For now, though, let's take you. Let's re-request that pattern provider. Fantastic. And down here, we should be able to get both of those online. So boom and boom. We are, of course, going to end up putting another pattern provider here in the middle. In fact, it's probably worth just going ahead and crafting that, because if we want to automate this, we do, of course, also need to teach our system how to make those effigies automatically as well. And so now we can just whack you in here, make sure this is connected to power, like so. And now we should be able to request all of those items and send them over through to a mixer to make the thermal paste. We do need to get the molten plastic. Again, thankfully, if we get a storage bus, we should be able to place that storage bus onto our tank that currently contains molten plastic over here, and then give our system access to that molten plastic so that it can use it to craft the thermal paste. So for that, we are going to need more of the logic processors, and for that, we're actually just missing more of these integrated circuits, which we do have. Fantastic. So let's take even more of those, drop them back in the system, quickly request the items required to make another storage bus, and if we slap that down right about here, boom, we can then connect that up to our pre-existing cable, like so, and that's going to give us access to that, to the point that we should then be able to just take a basin, take one of our mechanical mixers that we took up earlier in the episode, and replace this down with another pattern provider, and we should be basically good to go. Now, it would be nice if we could throw this down somewhere where we already had some kind of rotational energy. For example, somewhere right about here could work quite nicely. Now, we are going to need another pattern provider to make this work, so we'll request that. And this time around, we're just going to have the pattern provider go down, let's say right about here, like this, and we'll throw down the engineer's hammer on the back like this. From there, what we should be able to do is we should be able to, of course, teach our system the entire craft. So back over here, if we just shift click in the recipe for thermal paste, we can then click encode. I believe that's going to work. It does show 1 here. I don't know if we have to set it to 1000 or if 1 is going to work. I have a feeling, no, that's 1000 buckets, as you can see there. So this recipe is correct. This recipe here is incorrect. So that should work. Let's put that in here like this. And then from there, we just need to get you online. And for that, we need a cogwheel, which we have in abundance. We'll throw you down like this. And we need some gearboxes so that we can convert our energy here into, ideally, some vertical energy. And then from there, if we have even more cogwheels, we can do this, and everything is going to spin. So let's give this a try. If I request 1 unit, aka 1 bucket of thermal paste, it should, I think, send everything that we need over to here. It's going to start, of course, by crafting all of the items and pulverizing all of the items that need to be pulverized. It's also going to summon the mobs if they need to be summoned and pick up all the items that we need as part of that. But hopefully, if that all works according to plan, it shouldn't take anywhere near 1 hour and 57 minutes. Everything should just make its way over, which it has, and we have our first bucket of thermal paste. For now, I'm probably going to cancel that recipe. Although, what we might be able to do here, if I take the fluid draw, and let's say I place that down over here. I don't think it really matters where I place it, but let's say I put it here. If I then go ahead and lock that, as well as linking it to my system, I assume that I can lock that to thermal paste. And at that point, if I just have like a fluid pipe that extracts from the basin, so extracts from here, round back into here, I assume I could just extract the fluid and pump it back into the system, and presumably the system would then put it into that drawer if that drawer has space for it. There are a few things we would have to do to make that work. The first is that we would have to, I think, filter the fluid that gets extracted here, and we would of course have to make sure that over here, this drawer is indeed locked to thermal paste. And so it looks like we have to unlock it, put the thermal paste in, then lock it, and then we can take it out. With these, you do have to left click to take it out. Right clicking doesn't do anything, so you just left click and it puts it in and out. Has that confirmed this has been completed? It hasn't. Interesting. Let me take that out, and then let me quickly see about filtering this. So like, let me put this back in over here like that, and then let me grab a pipe upgrade so that we can actually whitelist what we want to be extracted. Again, unfortunately, to do this, we do have to go all the way up and spend a little bit on the diamond pipe upgrade, which is a little pricey, but I think worth it here. And then what I'll do is I'll take this out, set this to extract, put this in, and then we'll add thermal paste to the whitelist. Just shift click, by the way, on the bucket to add it like that. You can also click add and then do it manually, but it's easier to just shift click. And then now if I put that back in there, that gets extracted, and hopefully that marks that as complete. It totally does. Fantastic. And so now our system does know how to make the thermal paste, and so it shouldn't be, I don't think, that difficult for us to look at making these computer calls. Now, for whatever reason, we've not actually completed this question, and that is because of the fact that we have not done two things. We don't have any snow blocks because we didn't need them. Thankfully, we can craft those with the snow that we have, and that should complete that quest. It totally does. And then the quest wants us to get one of each of the blaze rod, which we have, as well as the bezels, which we have, the shard, as well as the moat, which we have, and I believe the cube is the last one. It is. That should be that quest complete. It totally is. And then now back over here, we can get our bucket of thermal paste, and the thermal paste is visible. Can I can. If I just left click there, I can take it out, and I get it. Nice. And I can right click that to put it back into that storage drawer, which is fantastic. We also get some more nickel coins as a reward. And now we just need to put that all together to actually make the computing cores. This, somewhat annoyingly, has a 60% chance to succeed. So 4 out of 10 times it is going to fail. But this shouldn't be too difficult for us to do. We need 5 slots, 3 for the circuits, 1 for the thermal paste, and 1 for the press. And over here, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 slots. Would you look at that? It's almost like he planned it. So if we get some shaft, my thought process here is that I'm probably going to leave a 1-block gap and then run another belt directly next to our pre-existing belt, like this. And we'll do something like this and like this. Do we have any belt in the system? We totally do. We can then do this and this. That gives us another belt to run along, and now all we need to do is just get ourselves 3 more deployers, 1 more spout, and 1 more press, and then get down 4 exporters, just like we have here, to export all of the items that we need to the deployers and the spout, and this should be good to go. Okay, so I've set up the line right here. We have our 3 deployers, our spout, and our mechanical press. We then have the same funnel system on either end. We've got a drawer ready to accept the processor, and we have a pattern provider going into a chest to send the items round and initiate the craft. So over here now, we run into a slight issue, and that issue is the number of channels available, and this is really where the P2P tunnel stuff really comes in super useful, I think. Because here, what I've done is I've already moved the P2P tunnel. It used to be here, I've moved it forward. The reason I moved it forward is that we've already run out of channels because we have more than 8 items. Because we have 2 over here, this guy and this guy, and then over here we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So we've got plus 2 more there is 11. That's way more than the 8 that our normal cable can carry. And so what I've done is I've moved the P2P tunnel forward to here. So now these 2 are kind of on their own separate network, still connected to the white dense cable on the bottom level, but we're now going to run another P2P tunnel over here. We now have a second one right here. This was still too many because we have 8 exporters and then the pattern provider. And so we're going to get a third P2P tunnel here to connect up the pattern provider. And that's going to allow us to fairly easily connect everything up to this dense cable without having to run that many dense cables over to that area. It's a lot of P2P tunnels, but they're very much so not expensive. We do, however, not currently have any silicon, so we can't actually make any more printed engineering circuits, and that's also what is currently stopping us from making more finished PCBs as well. You'll see if I go to craft it, we don't have the silicon to make it. That is because we have not taught our system how to make silicon. Thankfully, it's going to be fairly straightforward for us. If we make a redstone furnace, this is just an electric furnace from thermal expansion, which I think should be fairly straightforward to make. It is indeed. Again, we are going to want to get another pattern provider here to hook that up. For that, we're missing a logic circuit, which I did just take out of the inscriber, so that, again, should be good to go. It is fantastic. All we should need to do here is whack this down on our line of machinery. Boom. And boom, as luck would have it, we have exactly one basic universal cable left, like so, and now we should be able to quickly make sure we set these up correctly, because this needs to be set to both input and extract from the top. So does this guy as well, while we're at it. And we are going to have to configure this, because I don't think this can auto-eject to the top, so we might have to set up an item pipe to pump that back in, or maybe an importer to pull the items from there, because right now we're actually not going to get the blaze powder back. But back over here, we should be able to go ahead and teach it how to make silicon, like this. So 1 quartz equals 1 silicon in code. We're going to throw that into our redstone furnace pattern provider. Chat is right, of course. I do need to set that to auto output, like so. Boom and boom. But now we should be able to request silicon, really as much of it as we like. We should see quartz being sent around here. Again, not particularly fast right now, but we can look at making all of these machines faster in the future. That should give us the ability to take that silicon and upgrade it over here into printed silicon. And then from there, we should be able to, once again, do something like this, get our engineer's processor. That allows me to make yet another P2P tunnel, like so. And I think with that, we should be basically good to go here. So we are going to put this tunnel down, let's say right about there, connect it up with the memory card to the same frequency as the other 2 P2P tunnels, and then we're just going to run this up like that to connect that to our network. And now we just need to run some facades on here to cover a lot of this stuff up. I don't know if we can fully cover that up. I think that's as good as that's going to look, but that's fine. And we, of course, need to connect it up here as well. Boom and boom. So next time, chat, we're going to have to take a look at automating the production of the different tiers of processor so we can export all of those automatically. Over here, we should be able to export the thermal paste automatically already. And of course, if we put a crafting card into the exporter that has thermal paste, it's going to automatically request the thermal paste and then export it. I think that should work. Let me test that works. If I put this back, does that export the thermal paste into here? It currently doesn't. Let me try thermal paste. If I drag this from here, like this, does that work? That totally does work. Okay, so you might have to drag for the liquids instead of just putting the bucket in, but that one is correct. And here, of course, we need to get one of each processor if we want this to actually work. So logic goes in first, then calculation, then engineering. So logic can go here. We have to right-click these onto the hand there. Engineering, and then for calculation, we're going to have to get at least one more silicon. Again, thankfully still coming in. Boom. And hopefully, once we have this set up, it shouldn't take anywhere near this much effort, because of course the whole point of setting this up is that our system is just going to make it for us. So we're going to go and put you in here, like this. And then we now have 2 more recipes to teach. The first is the recipe for the computer called base, this one right here. This requires Certus quartz crystals, which we do have a large amount of, redstone, and then a skystone slab. Let's encode that. The skystone slab is made by crafting 3 skystone. Encode that. And then in terms of skystone, we are going to have to automate the production of the skystone as well, which we get by smelting skystone, which I think is then purchasable from the shop. So we're going to purchase the skystone potentially automatically, although I do believe that we can also get the skystone automatically by crushing the skystone into skystone dust. That gets us 1.25 skystone on average, and then you could take that and smelt it. So if you just set up a system that crushes it over and over again, you can get kind of an infinite amount of skystone that way, which I think we probably will set up, because I think it's almost certainly going to be more beneficial than spending 15,000 a time on skystone. But we are still going to have to teach our system how to smelt the skystone into skystone block. So we'll go ahead and encode that. So in here, we have our slab pattern that's going to go into the molecular assembler. We have our smelting pattern that is, of course, going to go into the redstone furnace. And then we have our computer core base pattern that is going to go into the new pattern provider, which is this guy right here, like that. And so I think, if I'm not mistaken, that we might be able to request our first computing core. Now, there is, of course, a second slight potential issue with this. I will click start, and I'm hopeful that will work. It looks like it... Oh, I'm a fool. Hold on, that is not all right. I did the wrong thing. Get rid of all of that. I put the wrong recipe in the wrong place. Take you out, all of you out. Good. Cancel, 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 cancel. Okay, I need to take this. This actually is a recipe that's going to go... The recipes, the textures look very similar for the computing core. This is the crafting pattern for the base. This is going to go into here with the slab. Let me put these away again. And then the final recipe that we need to teach is this one here. But this time we're just going to have the computer core base equals the computer core in code. And that is going to go over into here. Now, if we request that computing core, it should craft the right thing. And hopefully, if we get lucky, it should craft the right item. It didn't. We got a misaligned computing core, so we got unlucky. The good news here is that you can take these and you can reprocess them back into their original products. We did lose some thermal paste there, but we get back the processors and the computing core. So if I just whack this in here, of course, we are going to want to automate, I think, the repurposing of these different parts, but we can then kind of take that out, put these back where they need to be, and hopefully give that a second try. Let's put logic in here, and everything else is actually fine where it is, I guess. So if we try that again, this time we are going to have to cancel this. This is where it gets a little odd, I guess, in terms of how we request it here, because we're not going to get a result every time, which is not ideal. And that one worked. Nice. Okay, and we do get 8 more as a reward there, which is very handy. And so next time, chat, we're going to be able to come back and look at making our first single board computer, which really shouldn't be all that difficult because we kind of have everything we need here. Redstone ingots we have, integrated circuits we have, we've just got 8 computing cores, which is enough to make 4 of these single board computers. Silicon we have and finished PCBs we can make, and so that shouldn't be too difficult. We just need to get an advanced crafting table to do it, which is going to require some luminescence, I believe, which is a recipe that's going to require a superheated blaze burner, so that is something we're going to have to bear in mind for making that happen. But once that's done, we are basically on to the second to final chapter here, which is the industrial age. And I guess next time we can come back and start working our way through that quest line. There are a few things left for us to tweak, of course, because I do want to get this kind of fixed. Right now, it's not in a great working state. Next time, I also want to look, of course, at automating the production of all of the processes, the logic, the calculation, and the engineering as well. That's probably going to involve putting down multiple inscribers and having one for each of the different tiers of processor and also one for silicon as well. But that shouldn't be too difficult. And I think everything should be fairly easy for us to automate in terms of getting these computer cores going automatically. Like I said, the trickiest bit here, whoops, that's so much stuff. The trickiest bit here, I think, is going to be just getting it so that our system doesn't expect an output every time, or sending items back around so that they do in fact make an output eventually. That could be a little tricky, but I'm sure we'll figure it out. And it's also a problem for future Isaac, because for now, we're out of time for this episode of Forever Factory.